The knock wasn't normal. It wasn't a neighbor asking for help or a kid selling cookies. It was hard, rehearsed, calculated. Ethan opened the door halfway, his eyes locking onto two men dressed in navy blue tactical gear, patches sewn tight against their shoulders, silver lettering that read Homeland Security. "We're conducting an emergency compliance inspection," one of them said, not waiting for permission as he stepped past Ethan into the hallway. His partner followed, sweeping the room with a flashlight, scanning every corner like they'd rehearsed this 100 times before. Ethan didn't say a word. "Not yet. You live here alone?" one asked, already eyeing the backup generator tucked near the garage entry. He didn't wait for the answer. He radioed something in a clipped code Ethan recognized instantly, not because it was federal, but because it was sloppy. The radios weren't encrypted. The badges weren't real. And the patch stitching was crooked. Ethan followed them, slow, careful. Every movement calculating. Every instinct screaming. He wasn't just a veteran, he was trained to spot deception at 20 paces. And these men reeked of it. "You got clearance for that generator?" The taller one barked. "That's military grade. You could be charged under the Emergency Resource Act." Ethan's voice was low, calm. "Show me your identification." The taller one's jaw flexed. Then he pulled out a badge, too shiny, too new. Ethan caught the corner. It read, Karen Whitlock, Regional Director. That name he knew. Karen Whitlock ran the HOA board. 5 years ago, she was a real estate agent. Now she paraded around like a sheriff, handing out violations for trash cans left 5 minutes past pickup. The men wrapped up the inspection and left with a warning. "You'll hear from us again." That night, Ethan sat alone at his kitchen table, badge in hand. He flipped it under the light. There was no chip, no hologram, no federal watermark, just plastic and arrogance. He opened his laptop and dug deep, deeper than any civilian could. Within 15 minutes, he found it. Karen had filed a fake entity registration in D.C. under the name Homeland Emergency Oversight Alliance, HOA. She'd modeled the entire thing to mirror the real Jess, complete with badges, uniforms, and training exercises. And her authority? It only extended to one place, this neighborhood. The doorbell rang again. Ethan checked the camera. No one there. Just a manila envelope sitting on the mat. He opened it slowly. Inside, photos. Of him. Of his backyard. Of his garage. One image showed him carrying a large duffel bag. Another showed Lizzie, his neighbor, talking to him over the fence. Someone had been watching. Below the photos was a letter, typed in bold. "You are being monitored. Noncompliance will result in forced inspection under federal mandate." Ethan stood still, heart silent. For a second, it was like the battlefield again. Not bullets, but pressure. Not enemies, but shadows dressed like patriots. He looked out his window toward Karen's house. All lights were off. Her SUV parked perfectly between the hedges, almost like camouflage. This wasn't about property lines. This was something else. He walked to the back room, opened a locked chest, and pulled out a small metal box. Inside, his Navy SEAL insignia, his clearance card, and the burner phone that hadn't buzzed in 6 years. He powered it on and waited. If this story already has you hooked, hit like and subscribe now. Comment below if you've ever had to deal with an HOA going too far. You're not alone. The night air felt heavier than usual. Silent, but not calm. Ethan stood on his back porch, every inch of his property scanned and memorized. He knew this ground better than anyone, the soil, the cracks in the foundation, the blind spots in his old security system. But tonight, it wasn't just about knowing the ground. It was about preparing for war. At 2:14 a.m., motion lights flared across the fence line. Flashlights, at least 4 of them. Moving information, shoulder-width apart, silent boots, tactical gloves. They approached like phantoms, avoiding cameras, cutting through side hedges and back gates like they'd rehearsed it a dozen times. One of them raised a hand. The others paused. Then they broke formation and fanned out. Ethan didn't blink. He slipped through the back door and crouched behind the curtain. He watched them advance toward his shed, pointing at the tower bolted to its roof, his ham radio array. A voice called out low and sharp. Unregistered communication array. Suspected foreign signal relay. By order of Homeland Enforcement, We're dismantling this unit. Ethan's blood ran cold. They weren't just faking power now, they were rewriting law, fabricating charges, and targeting military-grade equipment. He stepped outside, slow and calm. That tower's registered under federal exemption. You don't have jurisdiction here. The man turned. Vest strapped too tight. No name tag. His partner moved to cut the cable from the junction box. Ethan raised his voice. Step away from the equipment. No. The men paused, only for a second. Then from the shadows, headlights flared. A black SUV rolled up fast, stopping hard. Driver's side opened. Karen Whitlock stepped out, not in yoga pants or a polo shirt, but in full black tactical gear. DHS badge on her vest. Custom embroidered name tag. Command stripes sewn crooked across her sleeve. Ethan, you're interfering with a federal operation. He walked closer, slow, controlled. You've got no authority. No clearance. That badge is a prop, and this is a neighborhood, not a war zone. Karen's lips curled into a smirk. You want to test that theory? Behind her, one of her agents pulled a taser, pointed it at Ethan's chest. Karen took another step. This is your last warning. Surrender the tower or face arrest under the Homeland Compliance Act. Ethan didn't move. His eyes locked on hers. Steady, calm, reading her. She wasn't just drunk on power. She believed her lie. Then, behind him, a rustle. A figure slipped through the bushes. Lizzie, Ethan whispered without turning. Get back inside. But Lizzie stepped forward. That badge is fake. I used to work signals intel for Army Command. DHS doesn't operate in residential zones without a federal warrant. And you never filed one. Karen's eye twitched. She wasn't expecting a witness. Or a soldier. I suggest you leave, Ethan said, now fully facing her, before you step into something you don't understand. Karen's face didn't change, but her next move did. Retreat. Silent. One gesture. Her agents melted back into the dark. The SUV rolled off. The air shifted again. Lizzie turned to Ethan. What was that? Ethan didn't answer. He just handed her the manila envelope. Her hand shook slightly as she opened it. They've been watching you two. Her face paled. Inside were photos of her. Zoomed in. Marked with notes. Potential collaborator. Signal threat. They're building something, she whispered. Something bigger. Ethan nodded once. Then let's take it apart. If this is already keeping you locked in, do the smart thing like subscribe and comment with the one moment that gave you chills. You won't believe what happens next. By morning, Ethan and Lizzie were already inside the local courthouse records office, buried under folders. They weren't searching for law, they were searching for footprints, slips, mistakes, anything that connected Karen's fake task force to a paper trail. Lizzie scanned fast. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her eyes were razor sharp. She'd served overseas too, in signals. Intelligence, not combat. But here, the battlefield was paper, not bullets. She found it. 3 permits. All fake. All signed off by the same person, an alias, Colonel D. Harmon. No such officer existed in the DHS database. The permits weren't even registered through proper municipal channels. They were forged under a phony oversight group, Homeland Enforcement Oversight Association. Not federal. Not real. Just 4 initials stitched on a patch to make it all seem legitimate. That afternoon, Ethan installed 2 new security drones, silent ones, with infrared and directional mics. Every corner of his property became a surveillance grid. If Karen wanted to play war games, she'd learn what precision actually meant. Then came the breach. At 9:43 p.m., one of the drones caught 3 masked figures crawling under his southern fence. They moved fast, cut the power to his garage, and pried open the service panel that led into the old radio room. Ethan watched it all from his tablet, eyes cold, pulse steady. He didn't call the police. He didn't need to. He moved quietly through his home, each footstep measured. He knew exactly when to move, not when they entered, but when they felt confident enough to stay. In the darkness, he opened the breaker box and flipped one switch. All lights came alive. The 3 intruders froze. Then Ethan's voice cut through the intercom system, crisp and direct. You have 60 seconds to exit my property before I file federal charges under USC 18 Section 1386. Impersonating a federal officer is a felony. This is your only warning. The figures darted out, but one tripped over the garden barrier and tore his pant leg. Ethan recovered the fabric, woven Kevlar, custom stitched with tag code inside. He scanned it. It traced back to a tactical uniform supplier just outside town. A bulk order had been placed 4 months ago. And the buyer? A private HOA entity registered under the name Patriot Residential Security. Lizzie looked over the invoice. She's building a militia, she said. Ethan nodded. Not just fake authority. A private enforcement arm. Controlled, armed, and invisible under local radar. The next morning, Lizzie's mailbox was ripped open. A single photo left inside, her son walking to school. Nothing written, just a target. She brought it to Ethan. Hand shaking, voice breaking. They know everything. They're not bluffing anymore. Ethan took the photo, stared at it, then burned it in the fire pit. Then he opened his laptop and typed 2 names into an encrypted site. Within seconds, a secure chat pinged back. We're listening. He typed, need full trace on HOA. Target's active. Immediate priority. Lizzie leaned over. Who are they? Old friends. Ethan closed the laptop and stood. No more defense. No more waiting. Karen made one mistake. She brought war to someone trained to end it. If you're still with us, hit that like button and drop a comment below. How would you handle a fake authority threatening your home and your family? Subscribe now because next they go too far and someone doesn't walk away. The explosion wasn't loud, but it was deliberate, controlled. It rocked Ethan's backyard at 3:07 a.m., shattering one drone, blowing apart his signal tower and torching the eastern fence line. A message, not a warning, a declaration. Lizzie ran barefoot into the smoke, choking on the chemical fumes. Ethan pulled her back. It's not just fire. It's magnesium trace. They wanted it to look like sabotage, not arson. He stared at the scorched dirt. The blast radius was small, too perfect for amateurs. Someone on Karen's side had tactical training. Ethan called it in, not to local law enforcement, to his contact on the secure line. He uploaded footage, fragments, chemical patterns. Within minutes, they responded. They're using ex-contractors, a former private military group operating under a dissolved charter. Unregulated, invisible. They dropped a name. Revenant Aid. He hadn't heard it since Kandahar. A team of mercs, disbanded, blacklisted, but dangerous. Their last known operation ended with a village leveled and 3 bodies buried under classified soil. And now they were here, wearing neighborhood watch badges and posing as federal agents. Ethan sat at his desk, surrounded by burned circuit boards and drone shells. He knew the playbook. This was no longer about intimidation. It was a soft invasion. 1 block at a time. They'd test his defenses, measure his reaction, then push harder. He opened the storage vault under the floor. Inside, his old comm rig, custom-built, encrypted on 3 levels. He wired it into a portable transceiver and tapped into silent bands, frequencies only a handful of operators still remembered. He broadcast one phrase. Unit Echo standby. Threat confirmed. Requesting Black Recon. An hour passed. Then his screen blinked. Echo unit en route. Arrival T-minus 22 hours. Lizzie stood in the doorway. You just called in your past. He looked up hollow-eyed. I didn't want to. But this isn't just about us anymore. She's planning something bigger. You don't create a fake federal agency unless you're building cover for real crimes. She sat beside him and handed him a folder. I broke into her HOA records last year. Found something. Never made sense. Until now. Inside were documents, zoning permits, land grants, hidden surveillance applications for adjacent lots, all signed under forged agency names. Karen wasn't just playing dress-up. She'd created a jurisdiction within a jurisdiction. A fake federal buffer zone, using HOA bylaws as legal camouflage. On paper, she controlled everything from curb to sky. Then Ethan saw the name. Lot 47B, designated for Federal Monitoring Tower installation. That was his property. They were going to seize it. Not with force, with paper. If they could establish his home as non-compliant under fabricated Homeland statutes, they could justify a federal repossession. Not legally, but believably. Enough to scare local judges into silence. Ethan stood. This ends tonight. At sunset, he climbed onto his roof with binoculars. Karen's house lit up like a command center. SUVs rolled in. Men in gear moved with purpose. He zoomed in on her garage, spotting weapons crates, labeled as training equipment. One label peeled off halfway. Underneath was a real military seal. She had stolen military-grade tools, or bought them through black channels. At 2:17 a.m., movement flared across his northern ridge. 6 figures, armed, tactical gear, night vision. Ethan activated the sonic perimeter. An ear-splitting pulse shot through the field, disorienting the intruders. Then he stepped out, lights flaring behind him. A single flare gun fired into the sky. Seconds later, the sky echoed with the chop of unmarked rotors. 3 black helicopters emerged from the cloud line, descending fast. Echo unit had arrived. If you felt that intensity, hit like and drop a comment with the part that shocked you most. Subscribe now, because in the next chapter, they cross a line they can't take back. And someone ends up in cuffs. The helicopters didn't land. They hovered just above the tree line, rotors cutting silence into shreds. From the belly of the lead chopper, 3 ropes dropped. And from the dark sky descended Echo unit, black suits, face shields, silent as phantoms. Ethan stood firm as they hit the ground in formation. No words, just nods. Old teammates. Soldiers who'd vanished off paper after missions the world never heard about. But they knew one thing. Ethan never called unless the threat was real. Lizzie watched from the porch, disbelief in her eyes. They scanned the property first. Thermal sweeps, bug scans, spectrum filters. Within minutes, Echo found 2 embedded mics hidden inside the sprinkler heads, disguised as maintenance tech. Karen had eyes on everything, even inside his own water lines. Ethan briefed them fast: the fake agency, the forged documents, the threat to his land, and Lizzie's son. When he mentioned Revenant 8, one of the Echo team's faces hardened. They're ghosts. No one's dealt with them in years. Then it's time they get pulled into the light, Ethan replied. At 4:44 a.m., Echo took positions. Lizzie patched the comms, and Ethan walked straight up to Karen's door. No cover, no mask, just the truth in his stride. Karen opened it before he knocked. You're out of your depth, she said calmly. My jurisdiction's already approved. Your house is marked for federal acquisition. Tomorrow it's gone. Ethan looked past her. Inside, 3 men in full gear flanked a digital map, his street circled in red. Pins marked every home. They weren't just taking his. They were taking the entire block. You built a shadow government, Ethan said, on fake credentials, using HOA bylaws as legal cover. That's not power. That's fraud. Karen smiled. Power is what people believe. And right now, they believe I'm the law. But behind her, the lights flickered. Echo jammed her internal comms. Every screen in her house went black. Then a live feed began to play. Footage from Ethan's drones, her fake agents trespassing, explosive sabotage, the photo of Lizzie's son. Every lie, every violation streamed directly to the private neighborhood security server. And a mirror of it uploaded automatically to 3 news outlets. Karen's smile vanished. You think that'll stop me? No, Ethan said. But this will. Behind him, 2 local officers walked up. One carried federal orders. Real ones. The others wore state attorney vests. They weren't here for questions. They were here for arrests. Karen looked around, realization dawning too late. Her private army? Gone. Melted back into the dark. Revenant 8 had vanished the moment Echo's rotors touched ground. Cowards in shadows. No loyalty. No backup. She reached for the door. Too slow. Hands grabbed her. Cuffed her. Mirandized her. You're being charged with impersonating federal officers, constructing a false agency, illegal surveillance, and endangerment of minors. Karen screamed, fought, but it was over. The street watched silently from their porches. One by one, neighbors stepped forward, recognizing what had really happened. They weren't protected. They were threatened, controlled, manipulated. Ethan stood beside Lizzie as the squad cars pulled away. She whispered, "You could have walked away." He stared into the sunrise. "I don't walk away from wars. I finish them." That morning, news vans lined the street. Headlines rolled out. Fake Homeland unit exposed. Neighborhood war hero uncovers shadow government. But Ethan didn't speak to cameras. He walked his perimeter, reconnected wires, cleaned the ash off his yard. Quiet, focused, whole again. Behind him, Lizzie helped rebuild the tower. Not as a signal array, but as a watchlight. A reminder. No one takes our homes. No one pretends to be the law. You made it to this part. Don't leave without hitting like and subscribing. Drop a comment with the moment that hit hardest. Because what happens next starts with one choice and ends with everything on the line. 2 weeks passed. The neighborhood was quieter, but not peaceful. Cleanup crews removed the debris Karen left behind: broken fences, fake surveillance equipment, paper trails of false citations. But something fell off. Ethan knew this kind of silence. It wasn't relief. It was retreat. The kind before another storm. Lizzie noticed it first. A black SUV, parked 4 houses down, unmoving for hours. No plates. Tinted windows. Every day, same vehicle. Different driver. Ethan ran the image through a facial pattern log echo left behind. The driver wasn't from local law enforcement or any government database. But his face matched someone from years back, not Revenant 8, but a data broker who once sold compromised military identities. They weren't just watching again. They were collecting. At midnight, Ethan triggered a false security breach on his own property, just to see who moved. Within 5 minutes, the SUV drove off. 15 minutes later, a new one arrived. Same position. Different license. They were rotating watches. He sent a secure message to Echo. They responded with a file drop, recent chatter from dark intel boards. Karen's downfall had triggered interest from a bigger syndicate. Her fake agency model. It had inspired others. What Karen started wasn't over. The file listed 3 other neighborhoods in different states, each with suspicious HOA expansions, sudden private security contracts, and residents going silent after complaints. A new operation. A new network. Same blueprint. Lizzie paced in Ethan's living room, her voice cracking. "We thought we took her down. We didn't know she was just the beginning." Ethan nodded. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was replication. What she built had been a prototype, a test run, and it had worked until it hit him. He opened a new folder, one he never wanted to look at. Old classified files from his time in Syria. Inside were images of occupied zones taken over by militias wearing official uniforms but operating outside all law. He saw the same symbols, same control methods, different soil, same blueprint. History wasn't repeating. It was being imported. Ethan turned to Lizzie. "We can't stay reactive. We need to take the fight to them." She hesitated. "What does that mean?" "It means we start making noise. The kind they can't hide." The next morning, they walked into a local journalist's office with everything: footage, documents, files from Echo. But Ethan didn't go on record as a whistleblower. He went on as a veteran. "I'm not exposing corruption. I'm declaring war on it." Within hours, the story caught fire. But it wasn't just media buzz. It triggered panic in the networks watching them. 3 safe houses were abandoned across the state. Shadow units began covering their tracks. But not fast enough. By the end of the week, 2 arrests were made. One man had a binder in his car with coordinates, maps of other neighborhoods, all color-coded by compliance status. Red meant hostile. Ethan's house was circled in red twice. Lizzie read the notes scribbled next to it. Neutralized by September. She looked at Ethan. "They're planning something big." He stared at the horizon. "Then we strike first." If you're still watching, now's the time to subscribe because this isn't just a battle anymore. It's a campaign. And in the next part, someone vanishes without a trace. The first disappearance hit hard. It wasn't an agent or a suspect. It was Benji, Lizzie's son. Gone without a sound. His bike was on the lawn. His tablet was still playing his favorite cartoon. No signs of a break-in. No footprints. Just Lizzie's scream echoed through the entire block. Ethan didn't hesitate. He activated the last resort protocol Echo had buried in his system, a sweep net. It pinged every active surveillance point within a 5-mile radius. A flicker hit northwest. A heat signature in an abandoned communication shack on county land. Too clean. Too obvious. Trap. He grabbed his sidearm and his vest. Lizzie tried to follow. He stopped her with a single look. I'll bring him back. I swear it. He moved like a ghost through the woods, boots never cracking a twig, breath controlled, pulse steady. The shack appeared on the horizon, quiet, too quiet. Inside, a speaker played a looped recording. Benji's voice, pre-recorded. You're already late, Commander. Ethan stepped back. He recognized the voice behind the loop. Revenant 8's last surviving field leader. He was still alive. And this was personal. The recording ended with coordinates. New location. A facility under the old reservoir. He knew it well. It used to be a Cold War listening post, decommissioned, sealed. But clearly, someone had opened it back up. He called Echo. They were already airborne. As the sun dipped below the hills, Ethan reached the mouth of the old reservoir. Steel doors opened for him, like they expected him. Inside was darkness, rows of old computers, dusted over consoles. But in the center, a single chair. Benji sat there unharmed, eyes wide, gagged but alert. Ethan stepped forward. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Not masked, not hiding, just smiling. You trained us to be invisible, but you never taught us to stay quiet. The Revenant leader. Ethan didn't reply. He stepped between him and the boy. You're making a mistake. No, Commander. I'm making a statement. You left us behind. You played hero while we were burned. Now look at you, playing watchdog in the suburbs. Benji whimpered. The Revenant took one step forward. But before his boot touched the floor again, the entire ceiling dropped open. Echo rappelled down. 6 ropes. Precision. The Revenant raised his hands, but too late. Ethan had already closed the distance. 1 punch. 2. Years of fury, betrayal, and guilt unloaded in a storm of fists. Blood hit the concrete. Lizzie burst in seconds later. She sprinted to her son, held him tighter than life itself. Ethan stood over the silent form of his former ally. You don't get to haunt us anymore. The facility was cleared. Files seized. Streams intercepted. Every shadow account tied to Revenant 8 was shut down within days. But something deeper had changed. The neighborhood, once just houses and sidewalks, now stood as a symbol. Veterans, families, survivors, they rallied. They demanded oversight, transparency, protection. And Ethan? He didn't return to the shadows. He built something new. A civilian task force. Funded, legal, monitored, trained to identify and stop domestic infiltration operations, from HOA fraud to fake agency overreach. Karen's reign had started a fire. Ethan made sure it ended with light. Lizzie joined the task force. So did 3 other residents. The very people who'd once been too afraid to knock on a neighbor's door now stood at city meetings, demanding accountability. One night, as Ethan sat on the rebuilt tower, Benji climbed beside him. You really were a soldier? Ethan looked down at him, smiled. Still am. Just a different kind of war now. And as the stars blinked above, the neighborhood slept in peace for the first time in years. This was never about power. It was about people. If this story moved you, subscribe and comment with your favorite moment. Because what started as one battle ended in a mission that changed everything.